All right, guys, welcome to another video. Today we're going to talk about the horn. Okay, after my last mentoring video, someone messaged me saying like if I could explain why I thought the horn was kind of overrated. We got into a discussion, and DMs is really hard to really have it. You know, it's not like a human being talking back and forth, and it just becomes a lot very convoluted. But I did tell him like, thanks for the suggestion. I think making a video about this would actually open up some interesting discussions. Okay, so some basics on rage. Okay, and a lot of this is courtesy of Wick Gaming. Like what he found really changed the game forever. One of the most important discoveries he had a few years ago was that there's actually a rage cap per turn, right? So if I come attack this March, right, the white damage you see, every time you see a white damage, that's essentially a turn. If you're staying connected, essentially you have a turn every second. If I actually disconnect, right, and then connect, disconnect, and then connect, all of a sudden there can actually be a gap or a downtime in the turns, and 7 turns instead of taking say like 7 seconds can actually take like 12 or 13 seconds, right, depending on how much I disconnect and connect. You technically stay in combat, I think, even if you're out of combat for 10 seconds. Don't quote me on that, I could be wrong, but regardless, a turn could actually, like, to launch an active skill, it could take way longer than the usual 7 to 8 seconds, depending on how consistently you're connected to the target, right? So a lot of times when we're seeing the testing, we're simulating a perfect scenario where you're either dueling, or it's even rally or garrison, where you're just staying connected. You just launch an active skill, right? But as any of us know, if you fought open field at all, you're not always staying connected to the target. You're not always firing off your active skill. A lot of times there's that rubber banding back and forth. So the horn could seem really good in theory, but when you think about it in the open fielding context, all of a sudden it might not be as good as people think. Okay, but regardless, if there's a rage cap of 220, on average, when you see that white damage, it's what you're actually seeing is that you're doing a basic attack, the enemy is doing a counter attack back, and then the enemy is doing a basic attack to you, and then you're doing a counter attack back. Okay. The basic attack you launch is worth 86 rage. The counter attack you do back is worth 16 rage, right? So when you add them together, it's going to be 102 rage. So every turn you usually see on the screen with that white damage is actually going to be 102 rage, right? At a minimum. Now, Wick Gaming did find that if you're hitting someone that's stronger than you, so essentially if your counter attack is weaker than the opponent's basic attack, or if your basic attack is weaker than the opponent's counter attack, you actually get an extra 10 rage apiece. So essentially, if you're fighting someone that's stronger than you, instead of 102 rage every turn, you're getting 122 rage. Now, let's just pretend we're not going to count that and you're always stronger than the opponent. Then once you start getting into the skill trees of the commanders, right? So whether it's a skill tree, support tree, or the attack tree, you're going to have something like the Burning Blood, where everyone puts 3 points into this. So every attack, you're going to do 9, you're going to get 9 extra rage. By the way, this is way better than Feral Nature. Hopefully by the time, I'm not going to even explain why I don't think Feral Nature is good, but hopefully by the time you get to the end of this video, you can come to your own conclusion why the Feral Nature is actually a very overrated skill, right? And then also for the troop specific a tree, you're always going to find something like the Undying Fury, which is essentially the same as Burning Blood, right? But you're going to invest 6 points in these two, right, 3 each, and then you're actually counting another 18 extra rage per turn, right? So if you guys kind of go back to what I talked about earlier, right, 86 rage for a basic attack, 16 rage for a counter attack for 102, and then you're counting this extra 18 rage you're getting every time you connect with someone. At a minimum, usually you could expect to gain 120 rage per turn when you're fighting on the field, right? If you're weaker, it could be 140, but let's just pretend it's 120. Right, so if the rage cap is actually 220, at most you have 100 rage to mess with. Right now, commanders that also could benefit you, help you gain rage faster. Right, so like Joan, her active skill, once it's launched, you gain an extra 20 rage per second. A commander like William, right, once he does his active skill, you gain 50 rage per second for 3 seconds. Trajan also boosts, I think, you by like 50 rage for 3 seconds or 3 turns, right? And then a lot of these commanders also have rage engines. So Zio has one of the best rage engines in the game. If you look at Luce, his expertise, right, you have a 25% chance to launch an extra, they call it a combo attack. It's essentially a basic attack. So basically 25% of the time, that turn, like Lucia is on, he's actually going to gain an extra 86 rage. So because there's all these ways where you can also gain all these rage, not even counting that you could be surrounded and getting attacked back, when the horn triggers, right, that extra 50 rage, it's very, very common that you're going to over rage. So basically the horn will trigger, but some or all of that rage actually won't have made a difference because you had already hit the rage cap, right? And what happens when the rage doesn't make a difference? And basically, whether you had the horn trigger or not, you were actually still going to launch your active skill at the same pace, right? So most of the simulators I've seen is that on average, if you have a skill tree and you're hitting a target, you're going to launch your active skill in 7 or 8 turns. And then if you have a horn on it, usually it'll shave that down by about like 0.5 turns to 0.8 turns, right? So if you guys remember when I first talked about this, if you're staying connected and you're launching a turn faster, essentially you're firing 1 second faster, right? Now, if you're talking about dueling, that's very, very powerful, right? Because if you could fire your active skill 1 second faster, your debuff is going to be applied sooner, right? If you fire your active skill, that bigger damage is going to decrease the target's troop count, which also lowers their damage output. There's a lot of benefits there, but that's only when you're talking about a one-on-one scenario. When you're thinking more of a big open field context, when there's a bunch of people on the on one side versus the other, right? And then you could be moving forward and back, right? Rubber banding back and forth, connecting and disconnecting. Even though it might take 7 or 8 turns for the rage bar to fill, but in reality, it might take like 12, 13, 14 seconds for you to actually fire the active skill, right? So now if you fire a turn faster, maybe you're firing it 1 second faster. So instead of going from say like 7 seconds to 6 seconds, right, which is actually a bigger jump relative to how long it's taking, if something is taking you 14 seconds and you're launching it in 13 seconds, do you get as much of an improvement? No. So again, all of this is just kind of like my perspective on it, right? I'm not saying the horn is garbage, it's worthless, but it's just like a lot of times when people are simulating the numbers, they're thinking about it in a one-on-one before the skill has launched context, right? Because if you guys look at even the support tree or the skill tree, if you have launched an active skill, for example, right, the skill tree and the support tree have rejuvenate. The support tree one's better, which is why you only want 2 out of 3 skills here. Because if you launch an active skill, right, you're instantly gaining 100 rage, right? So you're going to be at the rage cap. Now, if the horn triggers on that turn, it literally is useless because you're already at the rage cap. So even the horn triggers, you're not going to be able to benefit from it, and then you're not going to fire your skill any faster, right? So I guess like the point I want to make is that there's a lot of scenarios where in theory it looks good, like having the horn, but there's also a lot of scenarios where literally like the horn just won't be making any difference, and unless you're in an ideal scenario. So when do I think the horn is a good idea? If you're in a rally or a garrison and you're not going to get surrounded, right? So basically, essentially, you're almost in like a dueling situation. The first active skill before it fires off, right, you can actually have more chances where like if the horn triggers, that rage will fully be used. If you have a siege march, because if you guys understand kind of like what I just said about the basic attack counterattack, if I bring a siege march out right here and I just plant it here, I'm hitting a target, I'm doing a basic attack, and the only thing I'm taking back is counterattack. But the opponent actually isn't doing a basic attack to me, where I'm doing a counterattack back to them, right? So back to what I talked about earlier, if you're only doing a basic attack every turn, right, instead of gaining 102 rage or the basic attack and counterattack, I'm actually only going to be doing 86 rage per turn. So if anyone has ever used a siege before, you're going to notice when you're firing at something, it seems like the rage bar is going up super slow. That's because you're not actually dealing a counterattack back, you're actually only dealing a basic attack. So in that case, a horn would be a lot more valuable because the chances of overraging is going to be way lower. And because the rage bar is going up so slow, right, and there's room to actually hit that rage cap, having a horn in there would actually really, really benefit that march. Another thing to think about is a commander like Hua, right? So Hua, let me pull him up. His Autumn Wind, or his third skill, basically when you get a kill, or if you just enter a combat, the first 15 seconds, you're gonna be able to launch an active skill in with 850 rage as opposed to the normal 1000, right? So normally it's 1000. If this is trigger, you get to subtract the 150 from that. It'll be 850, right? So if you're just trying to hit 850, right, gaining 50 rage will actually contribute to gaining that faster than if the rage is 1000, right? Another way to think about it is 50 divided by 850 is going to be a higher percentage of 850 than 50 divided by 1000, right? So whenever the rage requirement is lower, right, you can imagine, let's just take this to the extreme, right? If a commander's rage cap is 220, right? And then, okay, fine, you're normally already gaining 120, but now, anytime the horn triggers, you're guaranteed to fire that active skill a turn faster. All of a sudden, the horn's going to become a lot more valuable, right? So if you do the opposite of that, right, let's just say something I showed you earlier where a commander is kind of going back and forth, and now instead of taking 7 turns, it's taking, say, like 20 seconds to launch an active skill, right? Firing it 1 turn faster, where maybe you could like launch it a second, maybe even 2 seconds faster, doesn't actually make as big of a difference. Okay, so I think in looking around the community, the general consensus is just, oh, when you're not sure, do a ringed horn. The ring for almost every March, I think, is still guaranteed. The horn, I think you have to be selective. Siege, it's going to benefit a lot from it. Commanders without a rage engine, so like Nevsky, yes. A commander like Hua that has reduced rage requirement, he's going to benefit from it. But for example, a commander like Guan, where if you have Scipio behind Guan, right, and then the target's silence, you're going to gain rage 30% faster. The way I'm interpreting that skill is instead of gaining 86 rage, right, when that skill is activated, you're going to gain 86 times 1.3, or 30% faster than 86. And then same thing with the 16 and everything else. So if that's the case, when a target is silenced, you actually don't need the horn, right? So don't put a horn on a commander with a rage engine. And then also, if it's a smite commander, especially for Luchet, you definitely don't need a horn on this March. I think a Greatest Glory and a ring is the way to go for this. It's like no-brainer to me. And then also, this is just kind of like my thoughts on this, right? I talked about this in my last video where part of evaluating a March is a theory crafting part, because you can have the reports manager where you just see the reports, right? You could kind of have like a field test where, okay, is this commander or is this pairing fast enough? Do they feel tanky enough, right? But like when it comes to like this rage thing, you can simulate it on a simulator, right? But it's always going to be doing some kind of controlled environment where you're doing one-on-one. Whereas if you just think about how open fielding actually goes in a murder ball situation, there's so many other factors that can come into play that it's more likely that it makes a horn less valuable than more valuable. All right, so that's kind of my case against why I think the horn is that great. Like, I don't think it's bad. I just think a lot of times people are talking about the horn, talking about it like it's just if you were dueling someone one-on-one, and then they're also not kind of taking into account the open field scenario where most people are going to be using it. So if you watch all the way to the end yet, you haven't, please like and subscribe to the video. And again, thank you guys for watching, and I'll talk to you guys next time.